In front of me, for a change, is actually my personal setup. Now you often see me with various different items of tackle with me, and I very rarely seem to be able to get out with my own dedicated personal tackle, but this is my go-to setup when I go fishing myself. And the reason I'm talking to you about it today is because I've had this setup, excluding the alarms, and maybe the variations of bank sticks may have changed slightly, but rod and reel setup, this has been one of my go-to setups for the last few years. So I feel I can talk about them a bit more in depth on an actual user experience of having these for such a long time. Now, these are my Scope 3.5 pound test curve 9-foot rods. Fully retractable, of course, 2-piece, so they pack down nice and small. And for venues like this, they're absolutely perfect. Now, originally I got these rods more for ideally for smaller venues, traveling lighter. I had my 12-foot Daiwa, what are they called? 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗲𝗲 X45 DFs, cork handles. I've done a long-term review on them before as well, so check the links in the description below where I talk about that setup. And that was my go-to setup predominantly wherever I went. I grew up fishing with 12-foot rods. It was kind of the norm to me, so it felt strange to go to anything other than 12 foots for anything, for my usual fishing. Hello Duck, you want to get involved? You've not left me all day. What do you want to add to this? You want more maggots, don't you? Maybe in a bit. But yeah, so my 12 foots were my dedicated go-to rods, and then these were for smaller venues. But I have to say these have slowly become, well, they are now my go-to rods, full stop. They're just a lot more practical, and I don't find they hold me back in any way. They're, like I said, they're 3.5 pound test curves, so venues like this, plenty strong enough to cast as far as I'd like on this venue. But also if I wanted to step up and go to slightly larger venues, or even when I fished with solid bags with these, got plenty of backbone behind them. I will add now actually, if I was to buy these rods again, I'd probably go for the 3 or 3.25, because I do find the 3.5 are probably just a little bit too stiff for my liking for the venues I fish. Like today I'm fishing for anything from a single up to, there is a 30 in here, some upper 20s to that. So I'd be plenty able to, that's terrible English, perfectly capable of using a lesser strength rod than these, but this just gives me a lot of scope to, excuse the pun, to go wherever I want with them. But I do find every now and then they're just a little bit too stiff. Having said that, they've never really bumped fish off. The tip's still nice and forgiving. When I do play a fish, especially under the rod tip, there's plenty of give in that tip, so I don't feel like I've bumped any fish off. And when they do take a lunge, it's a much more progressive. But I do find this section of the rod, which is obviously this half, is very stiff. So if I was to, like I said, to get these rods again, I'd probably go down to 3.25 or 3 pound. I'd still be able to cast all the distances I want to, but it just means that I'd be a little bit more progressive with the play in action, not quite as aggressive as these ones are. But having said that, they still do the job nicely for me. These have been used for several years now, as I mentioned. Another great benefit of shorter rods, which again, it took a bit of getting used to from moving from 12-foot rods down to a shorter style rod, is actually the accuracy with casting. I was used to fishing with 12-foot rods, so I was very used to how you cast them, very accurate with them. With these, I was a little bit unsure. It took me a while to get used to them, but once I did, these are now far more accurate, I find, in smaller venues as well than my 12-foots. Because you can really whip that rod, you can fire a lead quite well. So if you're fishing under something, over an overhanging tree, or just being nice and accurate to an island or something, I find that the whipping action, once you get used to it, it's easier to compress these rods. I'm not a very good distance caster at all. I sometimes struggle to compress higher strength rods, but because these are smaller, it's easier to compress them, I find. And it's just so accurate, and the feel of it as well, because you're less bending the rod when you stop the line as well, you can really fine-tune how accurate you are when you're casting. So that's one of the big benefits of the shorter rod, is on top of the fact that they collapse down smaller, they're easier to carry, they are just so much more accurate, in my opinion, on smaller venues like this. Now, of course, scopes are probably what a lot of people think when you say retractable rods. Everyone thinks Nash retractable, these are the ones to go for. And yes, I'd agree. Obviously, I own my own set of 3. I'm on a 2-rod venue today, but I have my own set of 3, and several years of using them, no issues with them. There's no scratches on the blanks where it retracts in and out. That mechanism still works absolutely fine. None of the eyes are bent, and I haven't always treated these nicely. The idea of a smaller pack down rod is that you can just chuck them in the car, go fishing, and smaller environments. Absolutely no damage to them whatsoever. I've not got cork handled ones. I'm not sure if the scopes are in cork actually, but these ones are just shrink wrap on the base of the handle. Again, no scratches anywhere, and I just put these on the floor. So I know there's a lot of waffle there, but they haven't degraded at all. If you look at these, even if I've just got a cloth and wipe them down to get any dirt off them, these look pretty much brand new. Even the real seats, there's a little bit of chipping around the paint mark, but that's what you'd expect. If you look at anyone's rods that they've had for several years, you'd expect to see that sort of wear and tear. So on the whole, I can't have any judgments or any issues with the build quality or how these have lasted. So very, very impressive. Now, of course, in my line of work, I do get to test all sorts of different rods. And if you're in the market for some shorter rods, would I say go to Scopes? I'd say definitely consider them. If your budget will go that far, you know they've stood the test of time. They've been around for years and years. But if you haven't got that budget, which not everyone has, then of course there's other alternatives in the range. Obviously Nash do all sorts of different retractable ones, but you've now got retractable rods from a whole manner of different brands as well, for all different price points, whether that's Sonic, I think JRC have brought some out, ESP have just brought some out. So a lot of people have got onto this concept because they've seen how successful they are. And I think Nash, although weren't the first to bring out the telescopic rod, when it comes into carp fishing and this sort of fishing and setup, I think you'd be hard pressed to find anyone that wouldn't say Nash straight away when you talk about retractable rods. But yes, it's a good thing that there's now competition out there. There's several other different options for you, different price points, right down from your budget friendly to racking up to more expensive ones like these. Now I think from a quick look yesterday, these are still available on Angling Direct, and just a quick Google, for around the 180 mark per rod. So they are at the higher end of the retractable rod sort of scene. But as I've said, they've stood the test of time. They're still lasting very well, and they have become my go-to rods. And it's also worth touching upon the reels I use with this, because of course a balanced setup needs to work. And I've gone for slightly smaller reels than what I've got on my 12 foots. These are the Shimano 5500 XTD Ultegras. I think I probably read that in a completely wrong way around. So Ultegra 5500 XTD, whatever. It's a lovely balanced little reel for this. It's a nice size. They're kind of a mini big pit. They cast sublimely well. They're some of the nicest reels I own. And I've used these on my 12-foot rods before as well. And they were completely up to the task for that as well. So I've kept them on this just for the balanced setup. They are, I think I've got outline camo line on there. It's the Avid line, and it just casts so nicely. So yeah, again, I've not really done any work on them or service them. Every year I re-spool and maybe give them a little bit of a clean of a bit of fresh grease, and they're still going solid. So an overall setup for day trips like this, or even canals and things, I've given them the abuse and they're still standing up to the test, and I'm going to keep on bringing them out because they're a joy to use. So yeah, that's my long-term review of these Scope rods, the 3.5 pound test curves. So I hope that enlighten some of you if you've been looking at these or you're on the market for some kind of retractable rods. It may not be the most in-depth on all the specs and things, but that's not what this is about. More about my actual personal experiences of using these. Now, unfortunately, I've not been able to show you any playing action with them today because they're staying very motionless. It was about -4 last night, and it's still frosty on the other bank, which is why I chose the sunny bank. But fingers crossed, sorry, before I head on today, I'll have something. But I have caught plenty of fish from all over the UK, and I'm not sure if I've taken these abroad. I may have done. Yes, I have. Holland. So I've caught them from all over the UK and in different countries, different sizes, from tiny little 2-3 pounders all the way up to, I think biggest I've had on this is possibly 30s, but stood the test and does the job nicely. That's enough of me waffling on. You want some more maggots, don't you? That's why you've come over here. I'll go get you some. And hopefully that gives me good karma to get a fish. What do you think? Yeah. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like it if you did, and hit the bell icon so you don't miss any future uploads, and subscribe to us, and also follow us on all the social media platforms coming up on the bottom of your screen right now. But that's it from me. Cheers for watching, and I'll see you again soon.